Today we're going hands-on with Canon's first full-frame mirrorless shooter, the EOS R. Welcome everyone, it is Andrew here from AppleInsider, and the full-frame mirrorless market is really heating up. Sony has dominated this market for years, before the likes of Canon and Nikon jumped into the party. Not to say anything about the rest of the market that has also been throwing their hats into the ring. The EOS R fits right in the middle of other companies' lineups, right between the A7 and the A7R III and the Nikon Z6 and the Nikon Z7. That's in both pixel count and in price. Inside the box, you're going to find a lot of the normal stuff you'd come to expect. Batteries, straps, and in this case, we have the kit. So it's got both the body of the camera and the new RF lens, which is a 24 to 105 millimeter with an f4 aperture. As this is the first EOS camera that Canon has put out, with those RF lenses, there's only a few different options. So you have the 24 to 105, you also have a few different telelenses, a 35mm and a 50mm option. More lenses are coming down the pipeline, but at the beginning, those are the 4 lenses that you have to choose from. When jumping into the mirrorless full-frame market, Canon took the opportunity, as Nikon did with the Z series, to revamp their lens mount. It now has a wider 54mm opening and a shorter 20mm flange. That lets a lot more light hit the sensor, and with that reduced distance to the actual sensor itself, it should increase its focusing abilities. As you'd expect from a 24 to 105mm lens, this thing would probably extend itself if it didn't have any sort of locking mechanism, which Canon built in. There's a small little lock switch that allows the lens to extend or not extend. While it's good in theory, it gets a little bit obnoxious when you have to unlock or lock every time that you want to use it, or risk having the lens extend. We prefer Nikon's locking mechanism, which kind of just bumps into place and is much easier to use. There's also the stabilization built into the lens, because there is no in-body stabilization on the EOS R like there is with the Sony and Nikon mirrorless cameras. It's good that they built something into the lens, but it's nothing like the 5-axis stabilization that you get with the other options. This plays a big part in causing shaky videos while shooting freehand, and even making sure you get crisp images without shooting on a tripod in fast scenarios. The body of the EOS R leaves a little bit to be desired. It actually feels a little bit on the cheap side, being largely made out of plastic. The interior build is actually a magnesium alloy that is very strong and rugged, but they capped it all with just this soft plastic that just feels on the cheap side rather than metal. Other controls are laid out pretty familiar to other Canons that are out there. Nothing bad, some of the buttons are a little bit hard to reach, a little bit difficult, but we did largely like the screen that they included. It still is fully articulated, which means you can pull it out, rotate it all around, and even close it against the body of the camera for some added protection. But it makes it a little bit obnoxious when you're trying to look up or down the camera because you can't tilt it on the body. You have to swivel it out first and then angle it in the way that you want to go. It is a little obnoxious and makes us worry we're going to break something, rather than the lesser articulated screens on both the Sonys and the Nikons that just offering tilt abilities up and down. Another questionable design choice was the placement of the on and off button. Just feels awkward over here on the left, though a lot of these knobs do feel really nice with this metal knurling pad on the outside to give them extra grip. However, when we were shooting in cold environments without gloves on or anything, they actually had quite a bit of tension and started to hurt our fingers because the knurling was rather sharp and kind of gritty against our fingers. So while it does feel a little bit more premium than the plastic body, the knurling was a little bit more than we actually would have hoped for. The top otherwise is very easily laid out. There's an illuminate button to light up the screen, shutter button there toward the front, and that red dot record button for shooting video. That LED panel is also pretty great. It's a dot matrix display that can switch between white and black interface depending on your shooting environment. When we talk about ergonomics, we took this camera out into the field and shot for hours on end to see how it really felt, how it felt in our hands, what we liked and didn't like, what we didn't get used to. Overall, the camera felt very solid, despite that plastic body on the top. The lenses felt extremely nice, and we were really fond of that 24 to 105mm, considering the Nikons only shipped with a 24 to 70, so you get a little bit more zoom in there. On the right hand side, there is no real thumb spot, which made it a little less secure in our hands when holding just one-handed. We really recommend keeping a secure grip on this or throwing on a strap to be doubly sure that it's not going anywhere. We really prefer the ergonomics of the Sonys and the Nikons. Going back to those lenses, there's a couple other things that we want to touch on. For instance, that second control ring. There's actually a whole ring that's dedicated to whatever you want it to be. Control the aperture, control the ISO, whatever you want to map it to. There are several different options for you to control with this ring, which makes it really great. You have it up against your face, looking through the EVF, and you want to make some minute adjustments. You can make them with that control ring and even see them represented in real time in the EVF or on the back screen itself. If you've got any legacy lenses, Canon also has adapters available to make them work with the new camera. There is only one media card slot, and they do just use SD, SDXC, any of those SD formats. We didn't mind, but there are some pros who are definitely not going to like this. They're really going to need to make sure that if they're using this in a professional environment, all those images stay backed up, lest an SD card fail. Canon does an excellent job of integrating the actual touch interface into the UI of the camera. It was really easy to navigate around and get where you're going and use the touchscreen, but there are some instances it was just weird. There's no joystick, and if we want to do something like move the autofocus point, you can't use a non-existent joystick, nor can you use the D-pad, leaving you to use the touchscreen instead. Canon does have an app available that you can use over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to control the camera and transfer images, though it was rather on the slow side. They've only baked in wireless BGN instead of wireless AC, so the transfer rates are not nearly going to be there, especially if you're shooting a huge raw image. Most of the time, you're likely going to want to use an actual cable and transfer over to maybe your iPad Pro or your Mac using the USB-C port, which has definitely been a godsend. As we were shooting with EOS R, there were things that we really just couldn't overcome. Things like that location of the on and off switch. Instead of putting it on the right hand side where our fingers already are, it's up on the top left, which just doesn't make sense. When we're shooting, we're trying to get our camera up fast. So you pull up the camera, your left hand has to go from kind of under as you're lifting the camera over to the top to turn it on, and then back underneath to support the camera. And without any in-camera stabilization, that stability is very important. We also had a lot of problems shooting video. Video freehand is pretty much a no-go because of the lack of any stabilization. It also has a ridiculous 1.75x crop factor, which really zooms stuff in. When you're shooting on this 24mm lens, it basically makes it a 42mm, and you lose all of that wide angle. Shooting wide angle 4K video on this camera is pretty much a no-go as well. Otherwise, we really enjoyed our time with the camera. The autofocus system was fantastic. It really did a great job of locking on, especially in video mode when it was using face tracking and subjects were moving forward and backward away from the camera. It was able to lock on and move very, very smoothly with the subject. The downside was it was a little bit loud and we heard an audible clicking on our actual footage. This was a great camera to take with us on the go because we could turn that screen around and protect it when we were tossing it in our bag. Throw a lens cap on the front, turn the screen around on the back, and you don't have to worry as much about a case as you would with something else where that screen does not turn around. Considering how much you can do with that screen, it would really be a bummer to lose it. We also love the fact that everything you see is live, both on the EVF and on the screen itself. Anything you change, such as the exposure compensation, the color, all of that is represented in real time, so you kind of get a real preview of what the subject looks like before you snap the picture. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few sample photos that we shot with the Canon EOS R. This first one here was shot outside in the cold winters of Ohio with an ISO of 5000 and an f-stop value of 4.5. This close-up shot, however, had an ISO of only 100 and an f value of 5.6. The sharpness of the lens really allowed us to see all the intricate details in those ice crystals that are forming around the edges of this leaf. This colorful fungi had a f value of 4 with an ISO of 4000. You can really see all the details and the color that pops here with very, very little editing done to the image. The colors are some of our favorite parts about shooting on a Canon. They're extraordinarily vivid and they pop, but they still look true to life. Saturation mildly can use a boost every once in a while, but overall the color representation on this camera is absolutely amazing. There is no arguing that the images, the color, the quality, the crispness that we're getting from this Canon and from the lenses are unparalleled. They are fantastic images from here, and they're a sweet spot with the resolution of 30. They're not going to be as insanely high as those 40 plus resolutions that only the pros are going to need, and they're not going to be as low as the 20 some as the Z6 and that A7. So you really do have a nice sweet spot as far as the camera goes, but it has a lot of compromises along the way. And the question is whether those compromises are going to be worth it for you. Truth be told, this camera seems great, but 2 years ago great, not 2019 great. I'd prefer more lenses to be out there. I'd prefer there to be wireless AC for faster wireless transfers and control. And the lack of in-body stabilization was a huge miss. Still, there is a ton of potential here. So if you're a Canon fan and you want to take the plunge, you can find the links for all of this down below in the description. And I want to hear your thoughts. What is your favorite mirrorless shooter?
If you enjoyed this video, like it and hit that subscribe button. Also, check out our price guide, which makes it extremely easy to find the best deals on Apple products updated daily. Be sure to follow us on social media, and we'll see you in the next video.